He sat there in his tailored navy suit, worth more than most people's yearly rent, grinning like he'd already won. Beside him, his high-profile attorney sipped imported water and chuckled at something he'd whispered. They both looked over at the empty chair across the aisle, and laughed. Lucas Kane thought this day would be a clean sweep. He thought freezing Olivia's bank accounts and cutting her off from every resource would be the final nail in her coffin. He told the court she was too disorganized, too soft, too fragile to fight back. He even claimed she was unfit to retain legal counsel. But there was one devastating detail Lucas forgot. He forgot who raised Olivia Quinn. Before I take you any further, please subscribe and like this video, and listen to my story till the end. And let me know, which city are you listening from? That way, I can see just how far this story has traveled. Now, back to that courtroom. The air in courtroom 6B of the Seattle Municipal Courthouse was thick, that kind of stillness that comes before a storm. For Lucas, it smelled like triumph. He adjusted his cufflinks with a smirk, glanced down at his gold Omega watch, and whispered, "She's late." "Maybe she finally realized defeat is cheaper," his lawyer muttered. Blake Thorne. A legend in the West Coast legal world. The man didn't just win cases. He vaporized opponents. People called him the Velvet Guillotine. Charming, clean-cut, and absolutely lethal. They shared a smug grin, certain this was already over. Across the aisle, Olivia sat alone. She wore a simple olive green dress that hung on her like a memory. Her hands were clenched together so tightly on the table that her knuckles had gone pale. She had no files in front of her. No whispering assistants. No ice water. Just her. And silence. "She's pathetic," Lucas said just loud enough for the gallery to hear. "Honestly, I almost pity her. It's like watching a lamb walk into a slaughterhouse." Blake smirked but kept his eyes on the front. Focus. Judge Mallory doesn't tolerate theatrics. "Let's wrap this up quick. I've got a golf game at Bellevue Country Club." Lucas leaned back with a satisfied sigh. "No worries. By the time you sink your first putt, I'll be a free man. And she'll be lucky to find a one-bedroom in Tacoma." The bailiff, a grizzled man named Officer Dent, bellowed, "All rise." The Honorable Judge Evelyn Mallory presiding. The room stood. In swept Judge Mallory, precise, severe, and utterly uninterested in nonsense. She took her seat and glanced over the docket. "Be seated." She flipped open a manila folder. Case #3014C, Kane vs. Quinn. "We are here to begin proceedings regarding asset division and the petition for spousal support." Her gaze landed on Blake. "Mr. Thorne." "Your Honor," he said, standing with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "We are prepared to proceed." Then she looked at the defense side. And frowned. Miss Quinn stood slowly, her voice barely audible. I am expecting counsel. She should be here any moment." Lucas let out a scoff, loud and mocking. "Traffic, probably," he said. "Or maybe you couldn't afford a bus ticket, Liv." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Kane, one more word like that and I will hold you in contempt." Blake placed a hand on Lucas's arm. "Apologies, Your Honor. My client is simply anxious to conclude what has already been an exhaustive ordeal." Judge Mallory turned back to Olivia. "Miss Quinn, the court began 5 minutes ago. If your attorney isn't present." "She's coming," Olivia said, firmer this time. "Please. Just 2 more minutes." 2 minutes, the judge said. "And not a second longer." Lucas leaned forward, grinning like a devil. "Or maybe you can call your mom from heaven to represent you," he whispered. "Oh, wait, she's dead, isn't she?" He chuckled. Olivia didn't flinch. She just stared at the big oak doors at the back of the courtroom. Waiting. The judge sighed and reached for her gavel. "If no counsel arrives by the time I finish reading this motion, the court will proceed." Bang. The courtroom doors swung open with a force that made everyone jump. And then, silence. A woman stood in the doorway. Not frazzled. Not rushed. Not apologetic. She was tall, commanding, dressed in a cream-colored suit so sharp it could cut glass. Her gray hair was styled into a flawless twist, her heels echoed with power, and she held a briefcase like it was a sword. She didn't look at Olivia. Or the judge. She looked straight at Lucas Kane. And smiled. But it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile you see seconds before the thunder hits. Have you ever witnessed someone completely underestimate the wrong person? Drop AIs in the comments if you're already hooked. And trust me, this is only the beginning. Because when this woman walks to the front of the courtroom, everything Lucas thought he controlled starts slipping straight through his fingers. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. The sound of her heels striking the courtroom tile echoed like a countdown. Behind her walked 3 associates. Younger, alert, suited. They carried thick briefcases and followed her in perfect formation, like knights at court. Lucas blinked. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Blake Thorne sat straighter, the first sign of unease flickering in his confident facade. He knew that silhouette. That poise. That presence. "No," he whispered, his throat suddenly dry. That's impossible." Lucas leaned in. "What? You know her?" Blake's lips barely moved. "Is that Olivia's?" "She said her mother was dead," Lucas hissed. As the woman reached the defense table, she didn't stop to shake hands or whisper hellos. She set her briefcase on the table, clicked it open, and finally turned to face the judge. "Apologies for the delay, Your Honor. There were some last-minute filings with the State Bar, and an emergency motion submitted to the Superior Court." Judge Mallory arched a brow. "Counselor, state your name for the record." She handed a gold-embossed card to the stenographer and met the judge's gaze without blinking. "My name is Vivian Quinn Bennett, Senior Managing Partner at Bennett, Sterling & Ward, San Francisco and D.C. offices. I am here representing the defendant, Olivia Quinn." She paused, then turned, slowly, toward Lucas Kane. "And yes," she said, her voice rich and steady, "I am also her mother." Lucas's jaw dropped. He looked at Olivia, who now sat a little taller, a little braver, then back at Vivian. His mouth opened but no sound came out. You're dead," he stammered. Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Clearly not. Though I understand the confusion. My daughter and I were estranged for nearly 2 decades. Until yesterday." She said it without flinching. No drama. Just fact. Powerfully delivered. Vivian sat beside Olivia. No hug. No touch. Not yet. This was war, and she'd come armored. Blake Thorne stood slowly, adjusting his tie with a little too much effort. "Ms. Bennett, I wasn't aware you were admitted in Washington State." "I'm admitted in Washington, California, D.C., and The Hague," she said smoothly. "And while I typically handle constitutional law and international mergers, when I got a phone call from my daughter, crying, because a 2-bit brand strategist tried to financially destroy her for sport." Vivian turned to him. "I made an exception. Have you ever seen a courtroom flip that fast? Face with tears of joy if you've been underestimated and proved people wrong. Drop a fire in the comments. And keep listening, because it gets wild from here." The judge leaned forward, intrigued. "Well, Ms. Bennett, Mr. Thorne has filed a motion for default judgment. He claims the defendant has no representation and failed to respond." Vivian slid a binder across the table with a firm thud. "We received that motion. Cute. Sloppy, but cute." She walked calmly to the bench and handed a second copy to the judge. Then, with slow precision, she dropped another on Blake's desk, heavier. "Mr. Thorne argued my client has no access to assets. That is now inaccurate. And as for the prenup, it was written on a boilerplate template your firm used in 2016. Lucas barked a laugh, recovering some bravado. "It's ironclad. She signed it the night before our wedding." She gets nothing. Vivian turned. Her blue eyes locked onto him like lasers. Do you know who drafted the legislation that revised coercion clauses in marital contracts for this state? Lucas blinked. What? I did, Vivian said softly. In 2004. She tapped the page. And according to my client's signed affidavit, you threatened to cancel her art show and pull the plug on her mother's care facility if she didn't sign. The courtroom gasped. You liar. Lucas blurted out. The judge banged her gavel. Control yourself, Mr. Kane. Vivian smiled faintly. We also have the texts. Recovered this morning. From the cloud storage you thought you wiped. The blood drained from Lucas's face. Blake was flipping through the documents, sweat collecting at his temples. Your Honor, Blake said weakly, we haven't had time to review this. You tried to get a default judgment on a woman you thought had no defense, Vivian interrupted, her voice low and devastating. You don't get to cry foul when the cavalry arrives. The judge opened the folder to Exhibit C. Her eyebrows lifted. And just like that, the power in the room shifted. Vivian turned to the courtroom. She placed her hand lightly on Olivia's shoulder. This isn't just about money, she said. This is about humiliation. This man tried to dismantle her piece by piece. Well, now we'll return the favor. She turned back to the judge. Permission to call Mr. Kane as a hostile witness. Lucas stood frozen. Blake leaned toward him. You have to go up there, he whispered urgently. You're the plaintiff. Lucas swallowed. Hard. He thought freezing her accounts would end the battle. He didn't realize her mother wrote the rules of war. Lucas Kane stood up like a man headed for his own funeral. His steps to the witness stand were slow, uneven. His crisp, overpriced suit now looked tight around the collar. The bailiff swore him in. Lucas glanced at Olivia, then at Vivian Quinbennett. She didn't even blink. Vivian walked to the center podium. No papers in her hand. Just poise. Just fire. Mr. Kane, she began, voice smooth. Let's talk about this traffic you mentioned earlier. The one that supposedly delayed my client this morning. Lucas gave a half laugh, trying to regain control. It was a joke. Olivia's always late. Scatterbrained. She loses track of time. Scatterbrained. Vivian repeated, her eyes narrowing slightly. Is that why you managed all the finances during the marriage? Exactly, Lucas said too fast. She's an artist. She paints dogs and trees. She doesn't understand money. Vivian nodded, slow and thoughtful. Right. So you were protecting her? Yes. Is that also why you purchased a luxury condo in Napa Valley last March, under the name Kane Holdings LLC? Lucas blinked. That was an investment. Part of the portfolio. Strange, Vivian said. Because according to your credit card records from that property, you bought nursery furniture. A pause. Olivia's mouth opened slightly. Her eyes filled with something between confusion and pain. Lucas shifted in his seat. That was for staging. Makes the place feel more livable. Vivian stepped closer. And the diamond bracelet from Magnolia and Fifth, purchased 3 days later? It was a gift for Olivia. No, it wasn't, Olivia said suddenly, her voice trembling but clear. I never received a bracelet. Vivian gave a sad smile. Of course you didn't. Drop a eyes in the comments if your jaw just hit the floor. And if you've ever had someone lie to your face while hiding a double life, this is for you. Keep watching. Vivian took a breath. Let's shift. Back to business. She held up a document. This is a signed affidavit from Apex Ventures Bank, based out of Luxembourg. According to the timestamp, $2.4 million was wired into that account, the same day you filed for divorce. Lucas froze. That was unrelated. Vivian raised an eyebrow. You declared your net worth at $8 million. But we traced hidden accounts through 6 shell corporations, all owned by your alias firms. When we add the overseas wire transfers, the Bitcoin purchases, and the forged ledger entries. She reached down and placed a second binder onto the table with a bone-rattling thud. Olivia flinched. Lucas stared at it like it might explode. We get a total of just over $23.9 million. Unreported. The courtroom gasped. One of the gallery spectators dropped a pen. Vivian leaned in, her voice now a whisper that somehow cut through the silence. You didn't just lie to your wife. You lied under oath. That's felony fraud. Lucas swallowed hard. This is a witch hunt. Vivian smiled. Then call me the huntress. Judge Mallory leaned forward, studying the pages. Mr. Kane, did you fail to disclose this information to the court? Lucas looked to his lawyer. But Blake Thorne? He just sat still. Silent. Vivian didn't stop. We haven't even touched on the mistress yet. But don't worry, we'll come back to Samantha Rios. I believe she'll be joining us shortly. Lucas flinched. Vivian gave one final glance toward Olivia. Miss Quinn, she said softly, do you recognize the name Box 411, Harbor Heights Vault? Olivia shook her head. That's where your husband stored a cold wallet containing over $600,000 in crypto. Bought with marital funds. Never disclosed. Lucas shouted. It was mine. His voice cracked. He looked around the courtroom. Everyone, even the bailiff, was staring like they were watching a man unravel thread by thread. I built that company, he said, louder now. She painted stupid little flowers. She didn't earn this money. Vivian looked to the judge. Let the record show that the plaintiff has now admitted to the existence of the hidden assets, and his intent to keep them from his spouse. Judge Mallory's face darkened. Thank you, Ms. Bennett. That's quite enough for now. Vivian turned and walked slowly back to the defense table. She sat beside Olivia, who was crying silently, but with her head high. Vivian reached out and took her daughter's hand. Lucas thought his secrets were buried deep enough to never be found. What he didn't realize is, Vivian Bennett doesn't dig. She detonates. Lucas Kane slumped in his chair like the weight of his lies had finally settled onto his shoulders. His face was pale. His voice gone. And beside him, Blake Thorne had already begun quietly packing up his briefcase. Judge Mallory glanced over her glasses. Mr. Thorne, I assume you're not leaving this courtroom in the middle of a hearing. Blake stood, his tone suddenly careful. Your Honor, given my client's most recent testimony, which appears to be in direct contradiction to the financial affidavit I submitted, I believe we have an ethical conflict. Lucas looked up sharply. What? Blake, no. You can't. Blake didn't even flinch. Your Honor, I must move to withdraw as counsel for Mr. Kane, effective immediately. As an officer of the court, I cannot represent a client who has committed perjury and withheld material facts. You coward. Lucas snarled, lunging toward him. You work for me. Officer Dent, the bailiff, had him back in his seat in 2 seconds flat. Try that again, Dent growled, and I'll take you out in cuffs. The courtroom was silent. No more smirks from Lucas Kane. No more whispered jokes. Just one man, completely exposed. Judge Mallory sighed and turned to Vivian. You may proceed. Vivian nodded once and stood tall, calm as ever. I call my next witness, Your Honor, she said. Samantha Rios. The doors opened. A hush swept the room. And in walked the mistress. She was young, gorgeous, dressed simply. But her face was haunted. She avoided Lucas's eyes as she made her way to the witness stand. Miss Rios, Vivian said gently, thank you for being here today. I understand how difficult this is. Samantha nodded. Her voice shook. I'm here because I need to be. Please tell the court your relationship to Mr. Kane. I was his girlfriend. For almost 2 years. Olivia closed her eyes. Her chest rose and fell. Slow, trembling. And, are you still together? No, Samantha said, voice hardening. I ended things this morning. After Ms. Bennett showed me messages he sent to his other girlfriend. In Chicago. Gasps echoed across the room. Vivian didn't flinch. Judge Mallory lifted her gavel but hesitated. The silence didn't need breaking. Did Mr. Kane speak about his wife to you, Miss Rios? Vivian asked. All the time, Samantha said, her eyes now wet. He said she was fragile. That she was a leech. That he was going to ruin her in court. Just because he could. Olivia covered her mouth. Her shoulders shook. Samantha turned toward her. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear, I didn't know he was this cruel. Lucas buried his face in his hands. Vivian's voice was calm, razor-sharp, but not unkind. Did Mr. Kane ever mention what he hoped would happen after the divorce? Samantha nodded, slowly. He said, he wanted her crawling back, begging him for help. He said he was going to make her disappear financially. Vivian stepped away from the podium. No further questions. There were no cross-examinations. Because there was nothing left to say. Judge Mallory removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. The weariness in her expression was mixed with fury. I have been on this bench for over 15 years, she said. And what I have seen today is among the most disgraceful abuse of legal process, of trust, of marriage vows I've ever witnessed. Lucas stared at the floor. The judge turned to Olivia. Miss Quinn, I owe you an apology. This court should have protected you better. But I will rectify that now. She picked up her pen and began writing. I am freezing all assets in Lucas Kane's name, including Apex Ventures and all holdings tied to Kane Holdings LLC. Access is hereby granted solely to the defendant and her legal team. Lucas groaned aloud. Second, Judge Mallory continued, Olivia Quinn is awarded immediate, exclusive residence of the shared properties, including the Napa Valley estate and the San Francisco townhouse. Mr. Kane, you have 2 hours to vacate. If you remove a single piece of art, a spoon, or a damn doormat, she added, you will be charged with contempt. Lucas muttered something inaudible. And finally, the judge said, glaring now, this court is referring today's testimony to the district attorney for possible prosecution, perjury, wire fraud, and financial abuse. Vivian glanced over at her daughter. Olivia looked stunned. Tears fell, but her shoulders were back. Her spine was straight. She had arrived in silence. Now she stood in strength. Vivian placed her hand over Olivia's. Justice doesn't always knock, she whispered. Sometimes you have to drag it through the front door. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Lucas Kane just lost everything. His money, his power, and his secrets. But just when Olivia thinks she's finally free, another betrayal from her past is waiting outside that courtroom door. As the courtroom emptied, Lucas Kane remained seated. Slumped. Pale. Alone. He didn't say a word when Olivia and Vivian packed their things. Didn't move when Olivia walked past him. No longer the woman in the olive dress with shaking hands. She didn't even look at him. But Vivian did. One last glance. Cold. Calm. Like a storm passing after leveling everything in its path. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight was bright. The Seattle air was brisk. Olivia took a deep breath. Her first real one in months. Then a black car pulled up. It wasn't Vivian's. The back window rolled down. A man sat there. Late 60s. Silver hair, clean-cut suit, eyes like a chess master with a grudge. Vivian's jaw clenched. Olivia froze. Dad, she whispered. Vivian stepped forward immediately, her stance turning to steel. Don't. He opened the door. I'm not here for you, he said. I'm here because Lucas Kane owes me money. Vivian's voice sharpened. You loaned him money? The man, Stephen Quinn, Olivia's father, stepped out, holding a document. He borrowed $2 million from my firm. Put up the Napa estate as collateral. Olivia's stomach dropped. No, she whispered. No, that house. I just got it back. Stephen handed Vivian the paper. He defaulted. The deed is mine. She'll need to move out. It hit Olivia like a wave. Betrayal stacked on betrayal. Why would you give him money? She asked. You knew what he was doing to me. Stephen didn't flinch. He said it was business. I didn't ask questions. I just saw numbers. Now I want my property. Vivian snatched the document and scanned it. Her eyes narrowed. Oh, Stephen, she murmured. You really thought you could win this one, didn't you? I don't lose, he said flatly. Vivian smiled. You should have read the fine print. She pulled out a blue folder from her briefcase. In 2019, when Olivia was pregnant, before the miscarriage, Lucas transferred the deed into a trust. For tax protection. The trust requires both beneficiaries' signatures for any collateral use. She held up the forged signature line. That's not Olivia's handwriting. That's Lucas's forged version of it. Your loan is void. Stephen's face turned to stone. Vivian stepped forward, quiet and cold. If you try to take that house, I'll sue Iron Reach Capital into ashes for facilitating fraud with forged documents. She tilted her head. Unless you'd prefer to walk away quietly, like you should have done 20 years ago. Stephen looked at Olivia. For the first time, his eyes showed hesitation, maybe even guilt. I didn't know, he said, voice low. I didn't know he forged it. But you didn't care enough to check, Olivia said. Just like when I married him. You didn't care if I was happy, just that he looked good on paper. There was a long silence. I'm sorry, Stephen muttered. Olivia shook her head. You don't get to be sorry now. You gave him money while he was destroying me. Vivian stepped beside her. You heard her. Walk away. Stephen stood frozen. Then, slowly, he turned, got back in his car, and pulled into traffic. Vivian exhaled. Then smirked. Well, she said, brushing imaginary dust off her blazer. That's handled. Now, how about that lunch? Olivia laughed softly, tears in her eyes. Only if I can pick the place. Vivian smiled, a real one, not the courtroom blade kind. Deal. 3 months later. The gallery was full. Waiters in black ties carried trays of champagne. Paintings lined the walls. Bold, beautiful, raw. Olivia stood in a crimson dress, glowing, surrounded by people who saw her now. Really saw her. At the center of the gallery hung the painting titled, The Weight of Silence. It showed a woman sitting alone at a table, but behind her stood a shadow made of fire. Vivian stood across the room, sipping a martini. Her phone buzzed. News alert. Lucas Kane sentenced to 5 years for fraud, perjury, and financial abuse. His own lawyer had testified against him. The hidden assets were seized. The mistresses vanished. She smiled. Justice delivered. Olivia joined her. Sold out, she said breathlessly. All of them. Every single painting. Vivian clinked her glass. You earned every bit of it. Mom, Olivia said, voice thick. I know we lost time. I ran so far from you. You needed your own path, Vivian whispered. But when you needed me, I came. They hugged. Tightly. Not lawyer to client. But mother to daughter. Not broken. But finally whole. If you've made it this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments. Did this story hit home for you? And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You are not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground, reclaiming your voice, and building something no one can take away from you again.